One. So we are live. Today we are live with Anand Kulkarni, who is the CEO of Crowdbotics, a company which focuses on software development cycle with the use of AI. Anand is also the founder of LeadGenius. He's the CEO and the chief scientist of LeadGenius, a company that was focused on AI for sales and helping sales and marketing teams identify buying signals. And lastly, he is also a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley of Industrial Engineering and Computer Science. So quite a hefty resume, and we're very happy to have you on the live stream. So thank you for being on today.
Hey, thanks so much, Jordan. Excited to be here.
Awesome. I was just mentioning a little bit behind the set that I was watching your videos from 8 years ago and 9 years ago on data-driven sales with LeadGenius and can digital jobs make for good work. I haven't finished that video, but I'm very interested in your take as well on that
Yeah,
a
it's
little bit down
old
below.
history now, but some of those themes still hold true today. I haven't been at Lead Genius for many years now. I've been running Crowdbotics for the last several years, but some of the ideas we got to explore there were very exciting, and of course, much of the stuff we're doing these days at Crowdbotics continues on some of the same themes. So I'm excited to talk more about this.
Awesome. So, I mean, I gave a little brief about you and your history, but if you don't mind talking a little bit about it, like how you went from engineering and doing your PhD to becoming a founder and CEO, and what made you do the pivot.
Yeah, sure. So, look, I'll give you the short version of my history. So, I did my undergraduate in math and physics at Berkeley, but when I was out there, I got really excited by computer science, theoretical computer science, especially AI. That was a time when AI was really dead. It's impossible to underscore how much of a winter it was in, even at UC Berkeley, which is now the centerpiece of a lot of AI excitement. Did my master's in operations research, got several years into my PhD, published a lot of work around some of the theme areas that are kind of important in AI today. We didn't have LLMs back then, but we had Amazon Mechanical Turk, which was an API that would give you intelligence on request. So imagine the LLMs of today, but instead you had real human beings answering questions for a penny a pop. And a lot of the things that are true about LLMs were true about systems like that back in the day, right? So you could do things like chain of thought algorithms, right? And you could build systems that were like ChatGPT-like, just very slow. So that was work I was probably best known for as an academic. This paper called Turk-O-Matic, which was basically ChatGPT, but using human beings on Mechanical Turk as a backend. And that was back in 2011. We published that stuff. So it was cool, but I was really excited by startups, really excited about what was going on in startups at the time. Y Combinator was kind of new. It'd just been around for 4 or 5 years, and I'd be reading a lot of Paul Graham stuff. So we spun out this thing from Berkeley. It was going to be a competitor to Amazon Mechanical Turk called MobileWorks. And it was focused on, as you mentioned, fair trade, fair jobs, fair payment to get better outcomes for workers, and also better outcomes on the other end for people who are doing the work. We had a lot of customers. At one point, we had one of today's biggest AI data annotation companies as a customer, which was really exciting. But we ended up pivoting that business because we weren't clear back then that there was going to be a gigantic market as much as we'd be interested in. So we flipped it into a company called LeadGenius, which was basically looking at data annotation just for sales and marketing models. That company is still going today, going strong. I have been working in the last several years, though, on a company called Crowdbotics. So Crowdbotics is doing something that was considered impossible at the time, which is now very hot, which is figuring out ways that you can reverse engineer code bases using application artificial intelligence. In other words, if If you look at a very large application, you try to ask ChatGPT to analyze it, it struggles, right? Doesn't know what it does, doesn't know how to change it. It will kind of write code around it. You can vibe code your way into a lot of cool stuff, but doesn't really understand what that application does, which means that you can't really automate everything that you want to automate. So Crowdbotics, we had the insight that if you try to understand requirements around a code base, you can suddenly start to do a lot of things in AI very, very easily with that code base. So for example, you can plug into an existing application, large or small, millions of lines of code, few lines of code, pull out all the requirements, the business logic, the information about how it works. Then you can flip that into a new destination language, right? So if you're running on COBOL in the IRS and you don't want to, you could use Crowdbotics to extract out all the millions of requirements or hundreds of thousands of requirements and change that into a modern language. And it's done by AI, so you can do this more or less efficiently. Very different from how we used to do things in the old days, but of course, much more efficient, radically more effective way. So we had the insights for CB, reading some of the early papers coming out of Stanford and Andrej Karpathy, who was talking about AI-based software development with neural networks at the time. We ended up collecting a lot of data about how applications are built, what requirements are used to describe them, figuring out commonalities and structures, and then we used that out in the field with customers to reverse engineer code bases. And that was kind of the way that we got from point A to point B on Crowdbotics. Of course, today we're a partner of Microsoft. That's public. We work with some of the world's largest system integrators. I think that's also public. And we work with a lot of enterprises, government customers, end users to try and figure out ways that they can use AI to modernize applications, to accelerate maintenance, and really is the centerpiece for their entire AI SDLC, which is the core of how we do business today. So that's a little bit of sort of history, how we got to where we are today.
No, that's amazing. That's a lot to take in, especially from back in the day. What you mentioned, I couldn't have even imagined that you guys had a what was it? The Amazon
Mechanical
the
Turk?
Turk,
Yeah.
Mechanical Turks. So these were guys that they just would pretend to be AIs and just respond to messages.
Yeah, it would be for anything you wanted, right? And nope, everyone knew it was humans, but
Yeah.
the idea here was that it was a marketplace with an API on the front, and if you needed to get intelligence and a machine couldn't do it, you could make a call to Amazon Mechanical Turk's API. They would post a little job up based on what you posted. A human being would look at this job, and you would put a price on it, right? Like 1 cent, 5 cents, $1, depending on how hard or complex the job was. And they would do the job for you and give you back the result. So typical things you could do with Mechanical Turk were the kinds of things that you would use an LLM for today, right? It wasn't really for chat, although some people did use it for like chat type activities. Often it was for data annotation, right? So like look at a picture taken from a car on a camera and say, draw a picture around a bicycle in this system, and then take that information and feed it back in. And so if you ask, how do today's systems, like Waymo's, how are they so effective at driving around? Well, it's because they have collected millions of data points from systems like Amazon Mechanical Turk, which used APIs to rate people, or to rate images and figure out how to provide training data at scale. So training data was like the big use case that we saw. Academically, though, the key insight was that you can use these systems to simulate real intelligence and do things that look like today's ChatGPT calls, right? So a lot of the same principles you use to get better results on Mechanical Turk actually map nicely into ways that you can get better results for LLMs today. So for example, human beings make a lot of the same hallucination type mistakes that LLMs do, right? Not always, but on occasion. Mechanical Turk was like the Wild West because people were just answering questions for money. So you get all kinds of wacky responses at times. So you have to do strategies to figure out hallucinations. So like a typical technique is you ask two people to answer the same question, because if they answer it in the same way, it's probably right. If they both made up answers, or if one of them made up answers, the answer is going to be different, and you can check that algorithmically. So the same thing works for LLMs today, right? If you ask the LLM this question twice, you get the same response, great. It's probably right. If it's different, then probably hallucinating. So there's a good example of where some of those same techniques still work, even today.
Yeah, I don't even know if you've seen recently with ChatGPT. It's come out with, if you ask it one question, it also comes out with two different results, and then
Oh,
it
yeah.
asks you which one you prefer from both of them. Is that something similar to that?
It's similar, but they're not really trying to figure out accuracy there. What they're trying to do, and it's a little similar, but really what they're after there is human feedback for reinforcement learning, right? So because ChatGPT has incredible scale now, I'm sure they do buy annotations still. Really, the best source of data is now feedback from their users. At least that's what I'm guessing from where I sit. You can look at the scale that they're getting data on. You ask millions of people which response is better, and then you feed that information back into their engine. You'll get good results on understanding how you are able to improve your performance. So yeah, many of the same ideas are still in place. You just can do it at a much bigger scale because you're dealing with lots of users and not just paid mechanical Turk workers.
No, that's fair. You have another question just before we go into the Crowdbotics side of it. But an interesting thing that you mentioned too was that there was still going through like the AI winters just back in the day too. Why was, from your experience, what was the reason that a lot of people didn't really see like the whole purpose in investing in AI back a few years ago?
Well, so this is a known phenomenon in artificial intelligence, where every 10 or 20 years, AI enters in what's called an AI winter, right? Which means that people don't believe that AI capabilities are really going to get better. And whatever people used to think were conventional, sort of groundbreaking capabilities in AI, people just think, oh, well, that's just how computers are. It's not really AI. You're kind of seeing it. You're not seeing it now because AI is so hot. We're still kind of 2 years after ChatGPT came out. People are still real believers that there's a lot of upside left. I'm one of them. But people were in this boom in the 80s where technology like expert systems, right, which are like essentially smart databases, or basic, systems like mapping, right, automated algorithmic mapping, like Google Maps in the 90s or I guess early 2000s. That stuff was considered bleeding edge AI at the time. And then after a while, people just said, oh, well, that's not really intelligence, right? It's just how computers do things. Okay, today language models are super hot, right? Super hot. So everyone says, well, yeah, this is amazing. It's so new for us. But human nature is that the novelty wears off. And if you look forward 20 years, people are probably going to say, well, look, this is how computers have always worked. Language models aren't really intelligent. They're just, natural language interfaces for everything. That's so obvious. Like, that's not real AI. Look, I don't agree with that sentiment, but it is a known phenomenon in how people think about artificial intelligence. You get the summers and the springs, and you get the winters. And so the winter will come again, I'm sure, but probably not for another 10 years, we'll say, while things are still exciting and rosy. And look, there's still a lot of upside left on the current systems. And look, I think they're extraordinarily powerful, exciting. So, yeah, at Berkeley in those days, people were excited by things. We were working on things, but people were working kind of against the tide. Language models were not a thing back when I was a PhD student. We of course had Markov models. We had neural nets. Lots of things that were precursors of this. WordNet was just getting hot, and over at LeadGenius we did some stuff with Bag of Words. Lots of natural language analysis. And that's all on a straight line towards what we see in today's language models. But the best insight here, of course, is that language is such a powerful unifying way for us to interact with systems, software systems, and it's intrinsically bound up with human notions of intelligence, which means that things are quite exciting for the scale of what this impact could be.
No, absolutely. And it's exciting to see like the new modifications that come out, especially every single, it's almost like month with ChatGPT, the ChatGPT 4.0. Not sure like what the latest model is.
Oh, 3 from them, but people love Claude 3.7 as well, Claude Code. There's lots of domain-specific activities as well. So, lots of new stuff is coming out more or less all the time, which is great.
No, it's amazing, and I'm seeing like so many AI companies coming up with specifically tuned GPTs.
Yeah. I mean, we're one of them too. So, we've built. We originally had before GPT-3 came out, we had our own kind of classical NLP models for doing what we do. So, our core activity is doing two things: what we call code to spec, which is taking a code base and describing in plain English every single thing this code base does. Right. So, like, you give us a code base, a repo, GitHub, whatever. Could be like tens of millions of lines of code. It could be just small. And we will give you an explicit step-by-step, here is everything that this software does, piece by piece. Okay, why do you want to do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but the big one is, first, you want to replace that code base with something new, and you want to figure out how much does it cost me, how difficult is it going to be. Second is you want to add features to it, and you don't know where those features need to go in the code base, and you don't want to pay an engineer to go read through the entire application to figure out exactly where to put that code base in. You want to ask an AI to do it. Or you want to characterize this system so that you can figure out, if you're a big company, ways that this fits into your overall activity stack, right? How much does it cost to maintain? What's the relationship of this against my business goals? Things like that. So you can carry out these activities really well if you are using AI tools. Off-the-shelf AI tools can't do this. So if you try to take a 10 million line of code base and give it to ChatGPT, it won't work. It doesn't fit in the context window, right? It's too big. If you try to break it up little by little and feed in every piece, that also doesn't work, because applications are not just like chunks of files. So you have to be clever in how you understand the code. There's also a bunch of languages that are just not in ChatGPT's training set, right? Even for the latest models. And so we run these days on essentially versions of these models in an ensemble, what we call a mixture of experts. And some of these have been tuned to be good at particular steps, or post-trained to be good at particular steps. That plus a bunch of good evals gets you into a place where you can perform really, really well on some of these problems. And we're right now actually the leading model, as far as we can see, on the code to spec problem, meaning we outperform GPT on this, no surprise. We also outperform the other major players on this, which is exciting. That's the big piece that we see. There's also spec to code, which is taking an application and turning it into code, running code. It's gotten hot now with vibe coding, and there's lots of tools that do this these days. Most of them make mistakes in places you don't expect, and that's where having really clear specs matters, right? So that's a use case that we do see in Crowdbotics from time to time, which is basically, I've got a spec, now I want to turn it into code, I want to do it reliably, consistently, correctly, not making mistakes the way I normally do with vibe coding. Crowdbotics can help you by generating out that spec accurately, completely, either from an existing legacy app or, from a concept, and then you can vibe code it to your heart's content, but do so in a way that's consistent and clear. So it's a little bit about where we've gone. So yeah, we're in that category too, of folks who are using stuff built in and around some of the leading models, which is great. We were one of the first commercial users of GPT-3 actually on their API, and things have only gotten better since then.
Well, first commercial users.
Among the first commercial, we weren't the very first ones, but we were early in there on the API.
Among the first.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Even with when you were telling me too that you kind of would go through code bases as well with Crowdbotics and see maybe how much updating a certain code feature would take in order to, like how much manpower, how much cost it would take. With as well the use of AIs with junior and senior developers, this kind of takes like a different turn. But what is your perspective with having junior developers, with having senior developers? Do you think it's going to kind of like cut out the junior developers with this, or is it just going to give them more room to grow and have that kind of creativity?
Yeah, well, I think I'll give you a couple of non-traditional takes on this, right? There's a conventional take, right? Which is, sure, junior developers get replaced by AI. That's a very conventional take. But I'll give you a different theory on this, right? So, there's a level of code that used to be when we talk about programming, right? Remember, we work with COBOL, mainframe systems, legacy code a lot, so we remember the old days of coding. In the old days of coding, um, think back, there was a time before there was object-oriented languages, right? Before we had modern web frameworks. There was a time when programming meant you were writing machine code, literal machine code, like sometimes on punch cards, right? Or writing it up, and mistakes were expensive and slow. But you were really writing low-level stuff for the computer. Now that used to be the definition of programmer. So if you were a software developer, you were really a programmer. You're writing machine instructions. Okay, that job has gone away, and it's been replaced by machines. And it was replaced by stuff that, we used to think about as kind of intelligent. Now we don't, because it's just considered computing. But, today there's compilers that compile all the code for you. So actually, most of the code that we get, that we run, compiled code, is all machine written, right? On the low level, we just don't think about that anymore. We just say, oh, it's part of the abstraction layer that we don't get to look at. We don't need to think about it. Okay, that's happening right now. We're in the middle of this change where the abstraction layer is moving up. Everyone is still coding. In fact, we're writing more code than ever. But we are doing that in a way that abstracts away a lot of what we used to consider the main activity for programmers. So that's not a shift that's really about junior devs and senior devs. It is about everyone taking one step up the stack. Programming, software development, at the end of the day, is about one thing. It's about specification. Exactly writing down what the system needs to do. That is the fundamental activity that doesn't change no matter how good AI gets, because as software creators, we are creators. We're trying to figure out how do we explain what we are trying to build precisely and accurately, even as systems get more complex. And so that job gets better, it changes, but we are going up the stack. So I think there is not really any change in demand except upward. You're going to see more people building software. You're also going to see the need for more systems that can understand software, right? Which is why we exist. Because as more people are creating software that's low level, those specifications and making sure they're correct become essential as the lingua franca between the people who are the humans in the process and the machines. So yeah, I don't think devs are going away. Even junior ones, I don't think are going away. I think they're just getting more powerful as they operate.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because when it's kind of like what I see is also kind of like evening out the playing field as well. Because I feel like, I mean, anybody even who they don't have an engineering background or a software engineering background who studied like English, literature or something, they can now create a website, or they can now just create an app by putting in a prompt. And from interviews that we've done in the past too, which kind of goes into one of the questions that I had queued up for you, was even the many times when you're trying to market a software that you have, the go-to-market strategy is being pushed to being significantly more important.
Yeah.
Do you see that shift also
Right.
coming in?
Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen that for some time, actually. That was one of our early theses at Crowdbotics, was that in a universe where software creation is democratized, differentiation comes from having go-to-market advantages or specialization within a niche, right? So, and you see this in trends these days, right? Like, it is still easy, as it's easier than ever to build the software side of the product. At least, the V0 of the software side of the product. Building V5 and V10 for the market still requires having good specs and effective tools. But software still is being built by people in the entrepreneurship space, by founders who have domain distribution advantages or unique knowledge about their problems. The happy marriage of those two is when you can take the AI, take the information you've got as domain insights, and instead of building it in as SaaS, the way people used to, you embody it in an agent, in an AI tool, and then you can license that agent out. We're still in the early days of that shift, but it looks like where the market is headed. So instead of saying, hey, I'm going to make a website as an entrepreneur, right? And you probably will still make a website, but that won't be the end state. You would say, well, let me make a tuned GPT workflow that I am licensing out to my customers that automates a business process end to end, that takes advantage of my domain knowledge as a financial planner or as a neurosurgeon, right? And I think those are interesting. Those are potentially powerful ways to go. Of course, those folks still need to have specifications attached, but I think they'll figure out ways around that because the demand is there and the power of these tools is really good.
It was I think we heard it from another guy too that we were talking to, that they were comparing also the GPT, like the GPT store, in compared to like the Apple store or the App Store, I should say. And now there was going to be like kind of fine-tuned GPTs, and since it became easier to create apps and like push them on the App Store, then it would also create like a GPT store for this. Do you also see that coming?
I don't know. It's possible. I don't have a good prognostication sense on this, just because I haven't heard of anyone buying GPTs off that GPT store. And I also think there's a real risk for creators in that store. And I have no reason to think this will happen, but I think that there's a risk, right? Apple used to snarf up the best apps into the App Store and just, in the best cases they would buy them, but in like the worst cases they would just release it themselves as a free app. And, creators used to complain about this. That could happen with GPTs, right? Folks could create compelling GPTs, publish them, and then, it gets snarfed up into the next wave of training for that model. It's hard to do that if you have a ton of data, but I think it's always a risk, right? For people who are just doing like a thin wrapper or just a couple prompts. We've been building data for a very long time, so we don't worry about that. But I imagine it's an interesting problem for others to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting back to a little bit of Crowdbotics too. Especially when you're testing individual features, when you're building like this enterprise level software, is there a certain strategy that you approach to when you are creating a new feature and having to kill it because maybe it doesn't resonate with your audience versus enhancing it? Is there a certain structure or schema that you follow?
Yeah, okay. So first, it's valuable to build fast and fail fast, right? And when you fail fast, you have to be somewhat ruthless about saying, well, this doesn't look like it's getting traction, let's not invest in it further. So we've been pretty good about that. I think the most important thing you can get is customer feedback on any feature. And like the best feedback you can get is customer engagement or revenue from a feature directly attributable. And so folks have various strategies for how likely they are to bet on that specific feature. But for me, customer feedback is key, right? So I take new features out right when they're built or even when they're just mocked to potential customers and users and say, will you use this? Here's what it does. Here's the value proposition. Would you pay for this? Would you pay more for this feature? And look, if the answer is yes on this stuff, then those are strong signals. And then you want to evaluate it after a feature is released, right? Once it launches, did it actually get the traction we thought? Was there usage? If not, why not? And how do we need to update our assumptions? And we're pretty good about deprioritizing things that were built and did not get traction. It's harder to know in advance what is going to get traction, and that's where getting feedback against mocks and against ideas is most important.
When you guys were starting off too, I know that you had the previous company beforehand, but at least when your initial go-to-market strategy, what exactly did that look like just in your initial years?
Okay, so early years, I just went to people who were friendlies and just said, "Hey, would you, do you need help with software creation, right? Or software understanding, software modernization?" And actually, I think that's a surprisingly underappreciated approach for early stage. It's hard if you're a college kid to find people who are like that, but not impossible. But it's pretty easy if you're a professional and you're building a startup in a problem that you know a little bit about, which is a better approach than going into some random sector. You go to people in your network and say, hey, would you use this? And you just need to get one to say yes, and then you're in business. Then you can incorporate and kind of go and do things. And so I'm a big believer in that approach of like, go to your network, go go to friends of friends, and like if it's an industry you don't have connections in, you should be going and finding and meeting people in that area and trying to learn about it. But that's really an effective approach. And I think that there are, of course, other ways. People, depending on the product, do all kinds of things and marketing tests and paid ad buys and so on. I don't like those as much. It works fine, but you're spending money and you're also not getting the direct feedback you need from a user about, is this actually something we care about or not? So for folks who are starting out, I always recommend in almost every sector, B2C, B2B, B2 enterprise, B2D, like go to your target users, ask them, would you buy this? Would you use this? And like, don't just, a lot of people start by saying, well, let me just go build something and see what happens, right? And that's okay too. But really you want to build like as little as possible before you start going and talking to a user and saying, will you use this? Because if somebody who is your target user who you think should be using it won't use it, change your idea, right? Change your features, change your approach. But if you find somebody who will do it, great, you're in business, right? You've validated this thing and you're off to the races. And that first dollar is like the hardest. After that, everything gets, it's still hard, but it's different and can be easier once you're at that point.
Yeah. Does it kind of have like a snowballing effect afterwards?
Yes and no. So it does. Once you get the motions of it, you have to bake those motions in, repeat those motions, and institutionalize them as business processes. 0 to 10 is a lot of work, and that's when kind of your hair is on fire. And then as you get bigger, you got to figure out ways to continuously grow and stay relevant. So 10 to 20, 10 to 50, like you require different things, like channel becomes important, right, as a distribution strategy. And then you're thinking about retention, year on year, upscaling, cohort, you're watching your cohorts a lot. So it changes. The problems you face are different at larger scale. But you're no longer trying to figure out how to get your first customers. You're asking, how do we get our next 1,000 customers, right? And that's a different scale to get to play at. It's a lot of fun though. I mean, that's part of the reward of doing this, right? So Crowdbotics, when we have focused on enterprise acquisition, right? We work, to figure out how we can grow inside of a given account. When we work with a customer, we say, look, we are supporting one of your code bases right now, which you are modernizing, but let's look at the next 2,000 legacy applications that you are paying money to maintain, that you don't need to pay money for. We can cut that cost in half. What will it take for us to get that next 1,000 applications connected to Crowdbotics? That's the kind of question that you ask when you're at a sort of later stage. And that's a place where you have to make the ROI case with a customer, right? It's very different than in the beginning when we were just saying, hey, is this a problem you actually have, that you have legacy code that you're paying to maintain or trying to update, right? So those questions of how to grow and scale inside an organization become very interesting, and it's a different set of challenges that you get to work on when you're later stage as a company.
Yeah, the problems definitely never go away. It's just kind of like you're leveling up every single time, and different issues at each level. We have a few entrepreneurs who also watch the live streams, and even myself, I'm not the skills you, but even just starting off, there's really hard times when you're building your company. If you could reflect on, even when you were just starting off at the very, very beginning, what were some of the most difficult challenges that you faced back in the day?
I mean, there's the challenges are kind of endless, right? When you're running a company, I think it flips back and forth between, two states. You don't have enough. First, you don't have enough customers because you're just getting started, right? Then you don't have a big enough scale to support the customers you've got, and you have to level up your performance, and that drives late nights and lots of work. And then you have to figure out, when you're bigger, how do we make sure we are moving at the right pace? How is everyone rowing in the same direction? How do you drive focus as a company? And then how do you build systems to make sure that everything is moving smoothly? And I think those changes end up becoming the natural life cycle of a company, right? If you end up making it, you are able to navigate each of those phases. Maybe not with true equanimity, but with enough stability and self-reflection to get through. So, look, those are all exciting ways and phases. They each have their own challenges, but I think it's also part of the fun, right? Framing it as fun is probably the right way to think about it as an entrepreneur, since ultimately you have the joy and the peril of working for yourself, which is as you probably know as an entrepreneur, right? But the upside is you can truly make impactful change in the world at scale, and I think for me one of the exciting things is we get to see how the world really works under the hood. When we think about, like, we work with a lot of mainframe systems, right? Legacy .NET, legacy Java, legacy Python, some modern stuff too, like modern web frameworks, but we see a lot of mainframe code, like COBOL, right? COBOL, 800 billion lines of COBOL code are still in production today. Billion with a B, right? It's insane, right? And it's like systems that we all rely on in our daily lives, actually every day, all run on this ancient software that nobody has modernized yet, right? And I'm talking about like our tax returns, right? Like health insurance systems, even when you swipe a credit card, like somewhere in a mysterious back office data center, right? Some stuff's running through a mainframe. And it's wild to think that like this like language that nobody supports anymore, that's like dying, that we don't train engineers in, is underpinning a bunch of our mission critical systems in life. And so that's where there's this kind of broader imperative that we get to see, that we need to help society move off of these systems and get better. And that kind of mission is exciting to support. It's a place where we can really drive a lot of powerful, good outcomes for the world.
Yeah, and I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that, but I also want to be mindful of the time, and I did want to ask you the questions about the videos I had the privilege of watching.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And there's, hopefully we can get time for both of them, but I didn't finish watching, to be honest, pleading ignorance at this one. I didn't finish watching the video of Can Digital Jobs Make for Good Work? And I heard a little bit about remote work, and I really wanted to get your take on that video and of what went on in that video.
Okay, so one of the notions we explored, this is at a prior company called LeadGenius. One of the notions we explored was about fairly paid digital work, fairly paid work in the gig economy. So there was this notion at the time that remote work was kind of new at that time. It'd been going on for a while, but like people called it telework and so on. We had the idea then that we should really take a look firmly at digital jobs being created in the technology ecosystem and asking ways that we could actually create those to be better for people on the other end, which as a byproduct would be better for the companies involved, because they'd get better work product, more loyal workers, and everyone would have what we consider to be a better relationship. We also had the idea, of course, that you could use this as a form of economic development, especially in places where maybe we don't see as much conventional investment from companies. So, we talk about rural areas in the U.S., for example, right, where you don't necessarily see mega companies setting up an office, right? Could we create employment opportunities via digital jobs, essentially targeting remote work in particular areas or geos and supporting that with direct outcomes? And so we found, you could do this. We did this at some scale with LeadGenius at one time. Before that at MobileWorks, we did it at a large scale for lots and lots and lots of people. And we showed you get better outcomes, you can create better digital jobs and better work. And of course, we worked with a number of companies to create a pledge in the gig economy that people could take, companies could take to have a gig workers sort of Bill of Rights, fair treatment model, and commit to it. And we got some really big companies to sign on to that, which was cool. Of course, LeadGenius was one of the main signatories as well. So we were excited to drive that model out. Of course, remote work is now a mainstay in our economy, as is gig work. And so some of those ideas are increasingly important to make sure that we can create good outcomes for everybody in the digital ecosystem.
Yeah, and it's crazy that you made that. I think that video was like 8 years ago, and
That was
you can
the
just
first
see like the
one.
growth
Yeah.
more and more.
Yeah.
And even on LinkedIn, like contractor work, gig work is increasing steadily every single year.
It's remarkable. Certainly, it's been a shift in how people work, which has been it's a liberating force in many ways. Those of us who are, um, working in places and times of our own choosing can be a very powerful way to bring more flexibility to a lot of people who um, maybe would have difficulty in the conventional workforce or who just want a better quality of life. So there's a lot to like. I've been proud to say we've, employed people, Crowdbotics actually, from across the entire country and, to some extent the world. The biggest part of our growth came during the pandemic, and so we have enjoyed working with talented people in lots of geographies. And talent has no geographic restrictions, so you can hire the best people in the whole world, as opposed to just people who are located in a few miles of San Francisco or New York or wherever companies usually hire.
Awesome. I want to see if I can squeeze like one more question, just in terms of like time restraint.
Let's do it.
Uh, the other question that I had, it kind of also, it's big in the marketing game as well, and it came from the video that you said that sales will be transformed by AI within the next 10 years. And salespeople won't be replaced entirely, but they'll be focused on higher level strategic work. Kind of also goes with like what you were talking about with developers too. Has it come to fruition? Have you like seen those patterns come in, and how can we adapt to that for salespeople?
Yeah, okay. First, I'll talk about salespeople, then I'll talk about for AI, right? So, yeah, AI SDR there's a new company launching in this space every week. I feel like it's such an easy activity. It was so hard 15 years ago, but they're all doing essentially this work of finding potential prospects, prospecting to them, and then doing some kind of interaction. That's on one side. On the other side, you've got tools that are analyzing sales activities as they are happening, summarizing them, entering them into systems of record, and then updating them, which are making sales very different, right? It actually makes the job of a salesperson much better and of the organization more interesting. The salesperson now has to think about the why, right? We used to have this stat that salespeople used to spend a lot of their time on data entry in Salesforce, right? Everyone hated it. Good salespeople would do it because that's how you can coordinate and stay focused. Now, of course, tools like Gong will just record your call, summarize the action items, put them into um, your CRM, and you go and edit it, clean it up, But you still, as a sales rep, have to do the hard work, which is building, establishing value with your customer, making sure that value is realized, and building the case, right? And so the job of a salesperson becomes more sophisticated compared to what it used to be, which is, hey, you're going to do your own prospecting and make 100 cold calls a day. No, you're going to think about the deals that you've got and how to make the best impact for your customer's problem, and that's a very important change. If you look at the software engineer as an analogy, right? We are now entering the point, not like at a mature stage, we're entering the point where I can make the same claim about software engineers, right? And when I say entering, it's because there's a lot of tools that are showing up. People are learning how to use them. But the deep problems in software architecture, which are basically requirements, are still the core problems that everyone is grappling with in software creation. The enterprise is grappling with it, the business unit is grappling with it, and the actual devs are grappling with it too, because if you get bad requirements from your team, any number of vibe coding tools are not going to help you, right? They're going to still make you go and rework that. So the key here is, can we really get to a future where the AI SDLC is truly driving automation, and so that in 5 years, the software engineer who is assisted by AI is actually thinking about uh, how they can coordinate what the business needs with what they are trying to create, and letting the AI tool do the grunt work. From my point of view, you need to have platforms that can make code bases intelligible by both AI systems and by human beings. those are tools like Crowdbotics or the category of things that look like us out there in the market that really generate the information, the knowledge graph, the spec of that application, and make sure the market can, or the tool can understand it well. So that's where I see the future headed. I'll make that same prediction that I made about AI. I don't think you're there yet with AI SDLCs. I think you will be in 10 years, where we will have a future where every application code base has its own system attached to it, its own AI, its own knowledge graph that is helping people work with that code base versus a generic tool that's good at every single code base. I think you're going to see tools like Crowdbotics attached in the AI-powered SDLC of the future. So we'll see if that comes through. Check back in 10 years.
No, I definitely looking forward to that. And I know I said that was the last one, but this is a quick, like, hopefully one-liner. If you could tell your 25-year-old self or your 21-year-old self when you were starting off this company something, what would it be?
Gosh, if I were to go back in time, I think it's important to focus on what matters in your company and in your life, right? And I think those are the pieces that, if you keep that point of view in mind, you will end up driving success from your company, but also for your personal life, right? And I think those are the things to keep in mind side by side. The other part is do problems that excite you, work on problems that excite you, because that's the part that keeps you going when things get a little tricky.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that, CEO of Crowdbotics. Is there any place that people can find you or can learn more about your company?
Oh, yeah. I mean, check it out, crowdbotics.com. There's the spelling. You can sign up. You can talk to us and get a demo. We'll even set it up on any code base you want. And you can see the magic for yourself. It'll make all of your AI workflows faster. It can modernize code bases. And yeah, we're always excited to talk to people who are looking to learn how to use AI to accelerate their SDLC.
Perfect. Even on COBOL.
Yeah, even on COBOL. No joke.
Well, thank you so much, Anand. And yeah, looking forward to having you back on. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan.
Take care. Perfect. Well, that is a wrap.
Great. Hey, thanks a bunch. That was fun.